I've been meaning to write this down for a while, but every time I try to remember the details, I get this sick feeling in my stomach. Still, I think if I don't get it out now, I'll just keep replaying it in my head forever. This happened last year, when I had to travel to another city for work, something that was supposed to last just a few weeks but ended up stretching into nearly 3 months. I decided to sublet my apartment during that time. Nothing fancy, just a 1-bedroom in a quiet building in a decent part of town. I posted an ad online, interviewed a few people, and eventually rented it to this girl who seemed completely normal. We met in person, signed a short-term agreement, I gave her the keys, and left thinking everything was settled. When I came back, the first thing that fell off was that my key didn't work. I stood there for a second, kind of confused, thinking maybe the lock had jammed or she changed it for security. I wasn't thrilled, but I figured I'd just knock and she'd open the door. I knocked once, then again. I could hear someone moving around inside, but nobody came to the door. I waited, knocked again, and finally a man opened it. Not the girl I rented it to. Some guy I had never seen before in my life. He looked at me like I was the intruder. I asked who he was and what he was doing in my apartment. And that's when everything started to spiral. He told me, calm as anything, that he lived there. I laughed, kind of awkwardly, thinking maybe this was her boyfriend or a roommate she hadn't mentioned. But then he said he'd been living there for a couple months and had signed a lease through a rental agency. I asked him where the girl was, the one I rented to, and he just shrugged. Said he didn't know who I was talking about. At that point, I was still trying to make sense of it, thinking maybe she had illegally sublet it again without telling me. I asked to come in and check my stuff, and he got real defensive. He told me I needed to leave, that he was calling the cops, and then he just slammed the door in my face. I stood there in shock. My hands were literally shaking. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through emails, texts, anything from the girl I sublet to. But everything was gone. Her number wasn't in my contacts anymore. No text history. I checked my email, and all our messages were gone. Like they never existed. I know I didn't delete them. I'm obsessive about keeping records. I even had copies of the agreement we both signed saved in a Google Drive folder. But when I checked, it was empty. I tried to log in to the subletting site we used, and my account had been disabled. At that point, I didn't know what scared me more. The idea that this guy was lying, or that somehow everything I had done to protect myself had just vanished. I ended up going to the building manager to try and figure out what the hell was going on. I explained everything. How I was the legal tenant, how I had sublet the place temporarily, and now some random guy was living there. But the manager just looked confused and told me straight up that according to their records, he was the official tenant. His name was on the lease, not mine. That made no sense. I'd been living there for almost 2 years. I even pulled up rent receipts and emails with the property office from before my trip, but they had no record of me at all. Like I had never lived there. I could feel the panic rising in my chest. I started to doubt my own memory, which sounds insane, but it felt like reality was shifting under me. I called my company, thinking at least someone there could confirm that I had gone on this trip and explain the situation if it came to legal stuff. But HR told me they had no record of assigning me to that location. They said I had been on personal leave during those months. That's not true. I worked every day I was there. I had co-workers, a supervisor. I even had receipts from restaurants I went to, emails I sent from the work laptop. But somehow, officially, none of it existed. I felt like I was losing my mind. And then I started thinking, what if this wasn't a mistake? What if someone had gone out of their way to erase every trace of me? That night, I didn't go home, or whatever home was supposed to be. I checked into a cheap motel a few blocks away. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that guy's face at the door. So calm, so certain I didn't belong there. I kept thinking about the look he gave me. Not confused, not angry, just cold. Like he had been expecting me to show up eventually. I tried calling a few friends, but the calls wouldn't go through. Some went straight to voicemail, others just disconnected. I messaged people on social media. No one answered. I felt completely cut off. Like I had dropped off the face of the earth, and nobody even noticed. The next morning, I went back to the building just to see if maybe, somehow, it had all been a nightmare. I waited across the street for hours, just watching. Eventually, I saw the guy leave. He locked the door, checked it twice, and walked off like it was just a normal day. I took the chance to go up to the door and knock again. Stupid, I know. But I needed something. Closure. Proof. I didn't expect anyone to answer, but this time, the door was unlocked. I slowly pushed it open. The apartment looked different. Completely different. None of my stuff was there. Different couch, different photos on the wall, even the smell was off. It looked like I had never lived there at all. I walked through the apartment like a ghost, barely touching anything. I opened the closets, none of my clothes. Kitchen drawers, different silverware. Bathroom cabinet, his toiletries, not mine. I even checked under the sink, where I used to keep extra cleaning supplies. Empty. I started to feel this crushing sense of being erased. Not just moved out, erased. Like my entire existence in that space had been overwritten. The only thing that was still the same was a tiny scratch on the wooden floor near the bedroom door. I remembered it clearly. I made it by accident when I dropped a shelf corner during assembly. That was the only thing left that proved I had ever been there. But even that wasn't enough to convince anyone. I went to the police later that day, desperate for help. I told them everything, even showed them the scratch photo I had taken months ago during a room tour I sent to a friend. They just looked at me like I was mentally unstable. Asked if I had been under any stress, if I had anyone I could stay with. I left the station humiliated and more scared than ever. If the police didn't believe me, who would? I kept thinking, what if I never get my life back? What if I never even had it, and everything I remembered was just something someone wanted me to believe? The following days were a blur. I kept checking my bank account, and that was the only thing that still had traces of my life before. Rent payments, utility bills, all showing transactions to that apartment address. But even that didn't help, because when I called the utility companies to confirm, they told me the account numbers didn't match anything on file. It was like I had the receipts, but the system they were tied to didn't exist anymore. I started to get paranoid, wondering if someone was following me or watching. Every time I turned a corner, I expected to see him. Not the guy from the apartment, exactly, but the idea of him, like he represented something bigger I couldn't understand. One night, about a week after all this started, I went back one last time. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd catch him off guard, or maybe I just wanted to prove to myself that it was real. But when I got to the building, it was boarded up. I'm not exaggerating. There was plywood on the windows, caution tape across the entrance, and a notice from the city saying the place was condemned. It looked like it hadn't been touched in months, maybe years. I stood there frozen, reading the paper over and over, trying to make sense of it. That was the same building, same number, same place I had just been in days ago. I couldn't understand how it was even possible. I backed away slowly, looking around to see if anyone else noticed how insane this was, but the street was empty. It was like I had stepped into a different version of reality, one where I didn't belong anymore. I tried calling the landlord again, the same number I had used 100 times before. Disconnected. I even searched online for the building address, and nothing came up. No listings, no reviews, not even on Google Maps. It was like the place had been wiped from existence. I stood there for what felt like hours, trying to convince myself that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined 2 years of my life, that I had really lived there. But I couldn't prove it to anyone, not even to myself anymore. To this day, I still don't know what happened. I never saw the man again, never found the girl I sublet to. My things were never recovered. Sometimes, I get this feeling that I've been pushed into a version of life that isn't really mine, like I'm just a guest here. I still check that address online every few weeks, hoping it'll show up. But it never does, and no one I know even remembers me living there. It's like that chapter of my life was deleted, cut clean out. I wish I had some kind of answer or explanation, but I don't. It happened. It ended. And I've never felt like I've been fully here ever since. I don't usually post stuff like this, but what happened a few months ago still messes with my head, and I feel like I need to put it out there. I work in a mid-sized office building downtown, nothing fancy, just your standard 5-floor glass and steel type of place. I usually have my lunch in the cafeteria on the 3rd floor. It's not great, but it's convenient, and I can zone out for a bit before going back to the grind. Anyway, around mid-February, I started noticing this guy. He was always there when I walked in, already sitting at the same corner table by the windows. He wore the same charcoal gray coat every single day, and he never had food. No drink. Nothing in front of him. Just sat there, staring at people. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe he was fasting, who knows. But it got weirder. I started realizing that no matter what time I went down, 11:30, 12 o'clock, 1:15, he was already there. Always in the same position, back straight, hands on his knees, eyes scanning the room. Not in a creepy, leering kind of way, just observing. Like he was studying everyone. I asked a few co-workers if they knew him, just casually like, "Hey, you ever seen that guy in the corner?" But every single one of them either said no or acted like they hadn't noticed him at all. That's when it started to bother me. How could he be there every day, and no one else seemed to even register his presence? One day, I decided to linger a bit longer during lunch, just to see what he'd do. I pretended to scroll on my phone, but I was really watching him out of the corner of my eye. He didn't move, not once. No fidgeting, no checking a phone, no looking out the window. Just watching people. And every now and then, I swear his eyes would land on someone and stay locked there for way too long. I remember he stared at a guy from accounting, Marcus, for what had to be 10 minutes straight. Marcus didn't seem to notice at all. That's what was so off about it. Nobody ever reacted to him. It was like I was the only one who could actually see him. That night, it kept bugging me. I even dreamed about him, standing in the same corner of the cafeteria, but the lights were off, and he was just sitting there in the dark, staring right at me. When I woke up, I felt like crap. My stomach was in knots, and I seriously considered skipping lunch that day. But curiosity got the better of me. Around 12:15, I went down like usual, and of course he was there. Same coat, same posture. But this time, I swear he was already looking at me when I walked in. I froze for a second. It wasn't just a glance, he was staring, like he'd been waiting for me. After that day, I couldn't unsee him. Every lunch break, my eyes would go straight to that corner before I even realized it. And without fail, he was already there, always watching. At one point, I thought maybe he was some sort of building security or undercover cop, but that didn't make sense. He didn't have a badge, never talked into a radio, never moved. And if he was security, someone would have at least acknowledged him. I even asked the guy at the front desk casually like, "Hey, who's that dude that's always in the cafeteria?" And he just blinked at me and said, "What guy?" I tried to describe him, but the receptionist just kind of shrugged and said he hadn't seen anyone matching that description. That night I stayed late to finish a report. Most of the office had cleared out, and it was pushing 7:30 when I decided to finally call it a day. I figured I'd pass through the cafeteria on my way out, partly to prove to myself the guy wasn't still there. But when I turned the corner and looked through the glass doors, he was still sitting at that same damn table. The lights were dimmed, but there was just enough glow from the emergency exit signs to see him clearly. Same posture, same coat, but this time, he wasn't looking around the room. He was looking directly at the door, at me. I didn't even go in. I turned around and took the stairs to the first floor as fast as I could. The next morning, I came in feeling uneasy. I tried to push it out of my mind and get into work mode, but I couldn't stop thinking about how he was still there after hours. I even considered talking to HR or building security, but how do you report something like that? There's a guy who just sits quietly and watches people. It sounded ridiculous, so I did nothing, but I skipped the cafeteria that day and just ate a granola bar at my desk. Around lunchtime, I decided to test something. I walked down the hallway that leads to the cafeteria and peeked through the small glass panel on the door. Sure enough, he was there. Same spot, same position. But this time, the cafeteria was almost empty, and there was no way he could have gotten in before me. I had just come down early. I swear, the moment I looked in, he turned his head toward the door. Slowly, like he knew I was there. I ducked back out of sight instinctively, heart pounding. I felt stupid, like I was being paranoid over some random guy, but there was something seriously wrong with him. Something off. I stood there in the hallway for a solid 5 minutes, trying to decide if I should go in or just go back upstairs. Finally, I took a breath, pushed the door open, and walked in casually like nothing had happened. I didn't look at him. I didn't even glance in his direction. But I could feel his eyes on me the entire time I was in that room. That night, something happened that really messed me up. I was walking to my car in the underground parking garage. It was late again, close to 8 o'clock. I was one of the last cars there, and the place was dead silent, just the hum of the fluorescent lights. As I got closer to my car, I noticed something in the reflection of the driver's side window. At first I thought it was a trick of the light or just my imagination, but then I turned slowly, and he was standing about 30 feet behind me. Same coat, same blank expression. No sound, no movement, just standing there, staring. I didn't even think. I jumped in the car, locked the doors, and peeled out of there so fast I almost hit a pillar. I didn't sleep that night. I kept checking all the windows in my apartment like some paranoid lunatic. I kept trying to tell myself it was just some weird coincidence, maybe even a prank, but I knew it wasn't. There was no way he could have followed me down there without me noticing, and no way he should have even been there. The building is badge access only, and that garage closes to visitors at 6 o'clock. I didn't go to work the next day. I called in sick and spent the whole day in bed, scrolling through forums like this one, trying to find anyone who had experienced something similar. Nothing came close. And that's when the real fear started creeping in, when you realize something is happening and no one else has a clue. When I finally went back to work a couple of days later, I took every precaution to avoid that cafeteria. I even changed my schedule around just to make sure I wouldn't cross paths with him. But on Friday, I had a meeting on the 3rd floor, right next to the cafeteria. I told myself it was fine, I'd be in and out. But as soon as I stepped off the elevator, I felt that same knot in my stomach. I glanced toward the glass walls of the cafeteria, and yeah, he was there, like he had never left. But something had changed. He wasn't sitting this time. He was standing at the window, facing out into the hallway, like he'd been waiting for me. I froze. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, staring directly at me through the glass. No one else in the hallway seemed to notice. A few coworkers brushed past me, laughing and talking like nothing was wrong. I wanted to grab one of them and say, Look at him. But I couldn't move. I felt cold all over, like the air around me had dropped 10 degrees. Eventually, I forced myself to look away and walked as fast as I could to the conference room. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. During the whole meeting, I could feel that invisible pressure on the other side of the wall, like he was still there, watching me through the glass. After that day, he never showed up again. I kept expecting to see him, kept bracing myself every time I walked past the cafeteria or parked in the garage, but he was just gone. No sign of him, no explanation. I even checked with building security, made up some story about a lost visitor, to see if they'd mention him, but nothing. They said the cameras didn't show anyone matching that description. It's like he was never there. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. You don't just imagine that kind of presence. The way the air shifts when he's nearby, that sensation of being watched so intensely, it makes your skin crawl. It's been months now. Everything went back to normal on the surface, but I still can't shake it. Every so often, I'll get this gut feeling, like someone's looking at me from across the room, even when I'm alone. And I'll catch myself glancing toward corners, windows, reflections, half expecting to see that same gray coat, that blank stare. But I never do. Whatever that thing was, it stopped. Just like that. No answers, no closure. And the worst part is, I'm scared it might not be over. I'm scared it's just waiting, watching from somewhere else. And maybe next time, I won't be the only one who sees it. I don't even know exactly why I'm posting this here, maybe just to get it out of my system, or see if anyone's been through something similar. I swear I'm not the type of person who believes in supernatural crap or anything like that. I've always been pretty rational, maybe even boring. But what happened to me a few months ago still keeps me up at night, and every time I try to tell someone, I sound like a crazy person. It all started on a random Tuesday. I was at work, totally normal day, nothing out of the ordinary. Around 3 p.m., my phone vibrated. It was a voicemail, but the weird part was that there was no missed call. Just the voicemail notification. I thought it was some glitch or telemarketing thing, so I didn't bother at first. But curiosity got the better of me, and during a break, I played the message. I don't even know how to explain it. The message was short, maybe 15 seconds, but it was a recording of what sounded like my living room. I recognized the sound of my old clock ticking, the faint hum of the fridge. There was no voice, no breathing, nothing. Just silence and the sounds of an empty house. At first, I convinced myself it was some kind of prank, maybe someone I knew messing with me, or a neighbor picked up something weird on their phone. But then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The number. It wasn't displayed. It literally showed nothing. No unknown, no number string, just blank. That night, I got home feeling uneasy, but I tried to act normal. I checked everything, doors, windows, even the damn closets like an idiot. Everything was locked, nothing seemed out of place. I told myself it was just some tech glitch and forced myself to sleep. But the next day, the same thing happened. Around the same time, I got another voicemail. Again, no missed call, no number showing. This time the recording was slightly different. I could hear my dog barking faintly in the background. But the weird part? My dog was with me at work that day. I take him with me sometimes because my office allows pets. So there was no way the barking came from inside my house at that moment. That's when I started to really freak out. I tried calling back, obviously, but there was no number to call. I checked my phone bill later that night to see if I could find any trace of the calls. Nothing. It was like the messages never happened. I even called my service provider, but they couldn't find any record of incoming calls or voicemails during those times. The guy on the phone basically told me I was imagining things, or maybe it was some app bugging out. But I know what I heard. And honestly, I started to dread checking my phone. Like every time I saw a new notification, my stomach would twist because I was sure it was going to be another one of those damn messages. By the third day, things got even worse. This time, the voicemail came in later, closer to 7 p.m., when I was already on my way home. Same thing, no call, just the voicemail notification sitting there like a ticking bomb. I parked my car and listened to it before going inside. The message was about 20 seconds long, and this time, I swear, I could hear footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps on the hardwood floor of my hallway. And then, the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. It's hard to explain, but when it's your own house, you recognize every sound, every little nuance, and I could tell exactly where those sounds were coming from inside. I was so freaked out I didn't even want to go in, but of course I had to. So I walked through every room, heart pounding, checking every corner like some paranoid maniac. Nothing. Not a single sign that anyone had been there. That night I barely slept, jumping at every little sound, checking my phone obsessively. I even left all the lights on, like that would somehow make me feel safer. I couldn't understand how someone could be recording inside my house when everything was locked, no signs of forced entry, no hidden cameras that I could find. I thought maybe I was being hacked, that someone somehow got access to my phone mic, but why would the sounds be of my house when I wasn't there? And how the hell were they sending messages from a number that didn't even show up anywhere? I started thinking I was losing it, that maybe I was having some kind of breakdown. But deep down, I knew I wasn't making this up. Something or someone was inside my house when I wasn't, and they wanted me to know. The next day, I decided to take the day off work. I wanted to stay at home, see if anything would happen while I was actually there. I sat in my living room with my dog, phone in hand, waiting like an idiot. Nothing happened all morning. No weird messages, no noises, nothing. But as soon as I stepped out to grab some groceries, literally I was gone for maybe 30 minutes, I got another voicemail. And this one really messed with me. I played it before even unlocking my car door. The message started the same way, with the usual ambient house noise, but this time, I could hear what sounded like breathing. Not loud, not obvious, but this slow, shaky breathing, like someone standing still, holding the phone close to their mouth. It lasted for about 10 seconds before it just cut off. That was the moment I realized this wasn't some stupid prank. This was someone inside my home, watching, waiting for me to leave. I ran back home, heart racing, completely losing it. I called the police this time. I told them everything, and of course, they looked at me like I was crazy. 2 officers came, did a sweep of the house, found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no hidden devices, nothing suspicious. They even suggested maybe it was a neighbor playing games with me. But how could they be sending voicemails from a blank number? I felt stupid, embarrassed, but mostly terrified. I knew they wouldn't believe me unless I had some concrete proof. But how do you prove something that leaves no trace? That night, I sat in the dark with a kitchen knife next to me, jumping at every little creak. And even though I didn't get any voicemails while I was inside, the fear just kept growing. The following 2 days were a blur of paranoia and exhaustion. I barely slept, kept the lights on 24/7, even blocked off the dog door thinking maybe that was how they were getting in, though it made no sense. I started recording my own house with an old phone I had, setting it up to capture anything while I was gone. But the recordings caught nothing out of the ordinary. The only thing that kept happening were those voicemails. Always when I wasn't home, always the same eerie silence mixed with familiar noises that made my skin crawl. On the 5th day though, the message changed. It was longer, maybe 30 seconds, and at the very end, I swear to God, I heard what sounded like someone whispering. It was almost impossible to make out, but it sounded like my name, spoken slowly, like a breath right against the mic. That completely broke me. I packed a bag and stayed at a friend's place for the night. I didn't tell her the full story because I knew how insane it sounded. I told her I had some issues with a neighbor and needed a break. And guess what? While I was at her place, no messages. It was like whoever, or whatever, it was only cared about me being away from my house. The next morning, feeling slightly more sane, I drove back, half expecting to find my place trashed or broken into. But everything was exactly how I left it. The only difference was a new voicemail waiting for me the second I stepped out of the car. I didn't even wait to get inside to play it. This time it was dead silent. No clock ticking, no fridge hum, no footsteps. Just this suffocating silence, as if someone was standing completely still, recording nothing but empty space inside my home. At that point, I was done pretending I could handle it on my own. I hired a private security guy, some ex-cop friend of a friend, to do a full sweep of my place. He checked for bugs, cameras, any kind of tampering. Nothing. He even double-checked the locks and told me there was no way someone could be getting in without leaving some kind of trace. I could tell by the look on his face that he thought I was losing it, but at least he pretended to take me seriously. I also switched phones, changed carriers, even got a new number. But none of that mattered. The messages kept coming. Always to the new number, always from nowhere. And it was always recordings of my home while I wasn't there. At some point, I stopped listening to them right away. I let them pile up, thinking maybe ignoring it would make it stop. But deep down, I knew that was just me trying to convince myself it wasn't happening. The last message I ever got is the one that still messes with me the most. It came about a week after I changed phones, in the middle of the afternoon. I wasn't home, obviously. The message was longer than usual, almost a full minute. It started with the same dead silence, but then I heard it. My front door opening. I know that sound too well, the slight squeak it makes because of the uneven frame. Then came slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone was walking straight to my bedroom, and at the very end, a voice. This time it was clear, no whisper, no doubt. It said, "You left the window open." That's it. The message cut off right after. I drove home like a maniac, but the window was shut, locked like always. I have no idea what they meant by that, or who they were. After that day, the calls just stopped. No more voicemails, no weird notifications, nothing. It was like whoever was behind it got bored, or maybe they felt like they made their point. I don't know. I still checked my voicemail obsessively for weeks, even months, but there was nothing new. The whole thing ended as suddenly as it started, and I never got any kind of closure. I kept waiting for some sign that it was a prank, maybe some sick joke from someone I knew, but that never happened. And what really gets under my skin is that no matter how many times I tried to explain this to people, friends, co-workers, even online, no one really believed me. They all assumed it was some scammer using spoof numbers, or that I was overreacting to some glitch. But I know what I heard. I know what I felt. Even today, every time I hear my phone buzz when I'm away from home, a part of me freezes. It's been months now, and nothing happened again, but that fear never really went away. I changed locks, installed cameras, moved to a new apartment eventually, but deep down, I know it wasn't about the house. It was about me. Someone or something wanted me to know they could get inside my space whenever they wanted, and they made sure I'd never feel safe again. I still keep those voicemails saved on an old hard drive, but I don't listen to them anymore. I can't. Just thinking about them makes my stomach turn. Sometimes I wonder if that voice was right, if maybe I did leave some kind of window open that let whatever that was in. What haunts me the most is that I'll probably never know what really happened. Was it someone stalking me? Some tech-savvy creep messing with my head? Or something way darker that I can't even explain? I don't have answers, and honestly, I don't think I want them anymore. I've done everything to try to forget it, changed my routines, moved cities, even got therapy for a while. But nothing really erases that feeling of being watched, of having your private space violated in such an intimate, quiet way. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was subtle, precise, like they knew exactly how to break me down without ever showing their face. That's what makes it worse. There was no confrontation, no chase, no dramatic ending. It just stopped, and somehow, that made it feel even more terrifying. So yeah, I guess I'm sharing this here because I know some of you might have gone through things that don't make sense, that you can't prove to anyone, that sound ridiculous when you try to explain them out loud. I get it now. Not everything wraps up with a neat little bow. Sometimes it just happens, and you're left with this hole inside you, always wondering if it's really over, or if they're just waiting for you to let your guard down again. Anyway, thanks for reading if you made it this far. I don't expect anyone to believe me, but writing it down helps me feel a little less crazy. Maybe. I moved into this apartment about a month ago. It's nothing fancy, just a small one-bedroom place downtown. It's the kind of building where you can hear your neighbors arguing through the walls, and the water pressure is hit or miss. But it's cheap, and that's what I needed. Everything seemed fine at first, but last week, I noticed something strange. I walked into the bathroom one morning, and the mirror was fogged up like someone had just taken a hot shower. The thing is, I hadn't used the shower since the night before. It didn't make sense. I wiped the mirror with a towel and didn't think much of it, figuring maybe there was a leak or something causing the moisture. But then it happened again, and again. By the third time, I couldn't ignore it. I started checking the bathroom obsessively, looking for any signs of leaks or cracks in the walls, but everything seemed fine. The shower tiles were dry, the sink wasn't dripping, and the room didn't feel humid at all. It was just the mirror, every morning, fogged up like someone had been in there. I even put my hand on the glass one day, expecting it to be warm, but it was ice cold. I'll admit, it gave me the creeps. I told myself it was probably just a quirk of the old plumbing, and decided to let it go for now. A few days later, I came home from work and noticed something else off. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, which was strange because I always close it before I leave. I figured maybe I'd forgotten that morning, but when I stepped inside, the mirror was fogged up again. It wasn't just the fog, though. There was a smear, like someone had run their hand across the glass. My heart started pounding because I knew I hadn't touched it. I stood there for a good minute, just staring at it, trying to convince myself there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe I had left the door open, and maybe the smear was from cleaning it earlier. But deep down, I felt like something was wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every little sound in the apartment seemed louder than usual. I kept thinking about the mirror and the smear, picturing someone standing there, touching it while I was out. The next morning, I called a contractor to check for any leaks or hidden issues. I didn't want to sound paranoid, so I just told him I'd noticed condensation and wanted to be sure there wasn't water damage behind the wall. He showed up later that afternoon with a flashlight and some tools. At first, everything seemed fine. Then he paused, tapping the wall lightly next to the mirror. "This is hollow," he said. "There's a space back here." My stomach dropped. The contractor removed the mirror carefully, revealing a small, dark opening behind it. It was just big enough for someone to crawl through. He shone his flashlight inside, and I leaned over his shoulder, trying to see what was back there. At first, it just looked like an empty space, dusty and cramped, with cobwebs hanging from the corners. But then the light hit something that made my skin crawl. There was a pile of old sleeping bags shoved into the far corner, along with some empty food wrappers and bottles. My stomach churned. Someone had been living back there. I couldn't even process it. The thought that someone might have been sneaking in and out of my apartment while I was sleeping or at work was enough to make me feel sick. The contractor didn't seem fazed. "Seen this a couple of times in old buildings," he said, like it was no big deal. "Sometimes squatters find spaces like this and camp out for a while." He started packing up his tools, saying something about sealing the wall up, but I barely heard him. My mind was racing. How long had they been there? Were they still coming back? And why the hell was the mirror fogging up? I tried to convince myself that whoever it was must have moved on, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. The sleeping bags didn't look like they'd been there for long, and the food wrappers weren't covered in dust. It felt fresh. Too fresh. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I kept hearing faint creaks and noises I hadn't noticed before. Maybe it was just the old building settling, or maybe my paranoia was getting the best of me, but every sound made me jump. I decided to sleep with the bathroom light on, thinking it would make me feel safer. Instead, it had the opposite effect. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a faint rustling noise. It was coming from the bathroom. My heart was pounding as I got up, barely able to breathe. I stood in the hallway, staring at the light spilling out from under the door, and then I heard it, a soft, almost rhythmic tapping sound. I wanted to run, but my legs felt glued to the floor. Slowly, I reached for the doorknob and pushed the door open. The mirror was completely fogged up again, even though I hadn't used the shower all day. This time, though, there was something written in the condensation. Just one word, scrawled in messy, uneven letters: "Stop." My blood ran cold. I didn't know what it meant or who had written it, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just some squatter. Whatever was happening, it was deliberate. Someone, or something, was trying to send me a message, and I had no idea what to do next. I barely slept after that. The next morning, I called the landlord and told him everything: the condensation, the crawl space, the sleeping bags, and the writing on the mirror. He sounded skeptical, but agreed to send someone to seal the wall that same day. I stayed home from work, too freaked out to leave the apartment. When the workers arrived, I watched them tear out the section of wall behind the mirror and replace it with new drywall. They didn't find anything unusual, just the empty space and some trash left behind. Once it was sealed, I thought I'd feel better, but the uneasiness didn't go away. It was like the air in the apartment was heavier, charged with something I couldn't explain. That night, I told myself it was over. The crawl space was gone, and no one could get in anymore. I double-checked all the locks before going to bed, and even propped a chair under the doorknob for good measure. But around midnight, I woke up to that same tapping sound. My stomach dropped as I realized it was coming from the bathroom again. I wanted to ignore it, to pretend it wasn't happening, but curiosity, or maybe fear, got the better of me. I grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the door, every step feeling like a mile. When I opened it, my heart stopped. The mirror wasn't fogged this time, but there was a single fingerprint pressed into the center of the glass. I stared at it, feeling my chest tighten. It wasn't over. The next morning, I couldn't bring myself to go into the bathroom. I brushed my teeth at the kitchen sink and got dressed as quickly as I could. I felt like I was being watched the entire time, even though I was alone. I called a friend to come over and told them everything, hoping they'd reassure me that I was overreacting. Instead, their face turned pale when they saw the fingerprint on the mirror. "You need to get out of here," they said, and for the first time, I seriously considered it. But where would I go? This was my home now, and I couldn't just leave because of something I couldn't even explain. Later that afternoon, I decided to investigate. I know it sounds stupid, but I felt like I needed answers. I grabbed a crowbar and pried open the small patch of wall next to the mirror that the workers had just sealed up. My heart was racing as I shone a flashlight inside. At first, I didn't see anything, just dust and darkness. Then my flashlight caught something glinting at the back of the crawl space. A small, handheld mirror, propped up against the wall. It looked old, with a cracked frame and smudged glass. I didn't understand why it was there, or how it had gotten in after the wall had been sealed. When I reached in to grab it, I swear I felt something cold brush against my hand, like fingertips. I yanked my hand back and stumbled away from the crawl space, my heart hammering in my chest. The mirror stayed where it was, reflecting the narrow space behind it like it belonged there. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in that moment. I decided I didn't care how crazy I sounded. I called the landlord again and demanded he come over immediately. I didn't mention the mirror this time. I just told him I was feeling unsafe and needed to break my lease. He wasn't happy, but he agreed to meet me later that evening to discuss it. When he arrived, I showed him the crawl space and the handheld mirror inside. He squatted down to get a better look and froze. "This wasn't here before," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. He reached in to grab the mirror, but just as his hand touched it, we both heard it, a low, guttural sound, like a deep breath being exhaled from somewhere inside the wall. He jerked back, hitting his head on the edge of the opening as he scrambled to his feet. "We need to seal this up. Now," he said, his face pale and sweating. Without waiting for my response, he left the apartment, saying he'd be back with a crew first thing in the morning. The landlord never showed up the next day. I tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I was too afraid to stay in the apartment alone, so I packed a bag and left. A few weeks later, I heard from another tenant that the landlord had been hospitalized for a heart attack, though he was only in his 40s. They didn't know anything about the crawl space or what he had seen. I never went back to the apartment, and I've spent the years since trying to forget about it. But sometimes when I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror, I swear I see something else behind me, something watching, waiting. I've learned not to look for too long.